This podcast details true crime cases. It contains adult themes and may contain descriptions of violence. This episode contains explicit language. It is not intended for children. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you all for joining me for today's episode of Once Upon a Crime. I am so excited for today's show. Those of you who have been listeners for a while now know that in December, I have very special guests on the show each week to discuss something that we've been covering or following or watching. So today, I'd like to welcome my very first special guest, Mr. Bob Ruff, the incomparable host of such podcasts as Truth and Justice and True Crime Binge. Hey, Bob.
Hey, Esther, how are you?
I'm good. First question, am I the first person to call you Mr. Bob Ruff?
Probably, yeah. Definitely nobody around here would call me that.
Yeah, it felt even weird just, saying it. So I thought I should ask. With MasterClass, you can learn from the world's best minds, anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. You can take a wide variety of classes taught by some of the most recognized names in their fields. What's the one thing you've always wanted to do, but thought it would take too long, cost too much, or be impossible to achieve? Well, with MasterClass, you can really achieve that dream. You can access classes on your phone, internet, or smart TV, and most lessons are only about 10 minutes in length. Annual memberships are so affordable, you'll be amazed. And talk about amazing, you can learn to cook with Gordon Ramsay, or learn to write short stories with one of my favorite authors ever, Joyce Carol Oates. Even performing arts like singing. Learn from the very best, like Christina Aguilera and Mariah Carey. Yes, these are your instructors. I'm learning how to elevate my singing and stage presence with Christina. You know I'll be ready for those holiday karaoke parties. Fun. There are so many great classes that I can't tell you about all of them here. I highly recommend you check them out. And how great would it be to give a gift of learning with MasterClass to a friend or family member this holiday season? Not only will it be the best gift they ever received, but this holiday, give one annual membership and get one free. Go to masterclass.com/once today. That's masterclass.com/once. Terms apply. So you all might not know this, but Bob and I have spent some time together at CrimeCon, and we did the Gen Y Livestream event just a few months ago in Kansas City. And I think that we've also both learned that when we're together, there's really no telling what's going to come out of our mouth. Well, especially Bob's mouth. You never know what's going to come out.
I like how you set that up like you were part of it, but no, actually just Bob just says random stuff all the time.
Oh, yeah. I can definitely, go with the flow, and if somebody gets me going, I'll join right in. So, yeah, so it is all you, Bob. Usually I'm fine.
Right. Listen, that Gen Y situation was not my fault. They told me 5 minutes before we went on stage that I was supposed to be emceeing or whatever.
Really? Section. And you had probably had about what, 6 or 8 drinks before then.
Right. Yeah. I was having a good time. And so was everybody except that one lady in the front row.
Who gave you the dirty looks or something? Was that?
She didn't like my jokes. And she shouted that as loud as she could.
I'll have to go back and watch that again because I missed that. Oh God, that's hilarious.
Oh my gosh, that's why the whole show shifted.
Right.
The guys were just cracking up, so was the crowd, and then all of a sudden that woman shouted it out because it was very loud.
Yeah. Less jokes and more crime.
Yeah.
And then it got really awkward, and so we started talking about crime, which is very boring compared to what was going on.
So you guys might have recognized that voice. I was just about to introduce her, and because I haven't done that yet. That was Lorena, and she is my wonderful assistant, my ride or die. Good morning, Lorena.
Good morning. Good morning, Bob. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
Lorena's here to keep us on track. Okay, Bob?
Yes.
That's what you said when we were in Kansas City, and then she was the one with the double fist and drinks.
She's got a bone to pick with you.
I was on my way to the gym and I was like, oh, let me turn on the True Crime Binge episode with Esther. And I was like, I love how in the first 5 minutes, Bob tries to call me out for shoving drinks down his throat. I was like, that was not me.
She texted me.
I was like, Bob blaming me? Yeah, right.
She's like, Bob threw me under the bus.
Thank you for not being there to defend yourself.
Right. True.
Yeah, that is your fault. Okay, so today, though, we're going to discuss, to me, a really fascinating case that I learned about several years ago. Some of you who know my sister Yolanda know that she had a podcast for a while. It's on hiatus now, but she covered the story because her podcast, she was doing it with her husband, and he was a big sports fan. And so they would usually pick cases that had something to do with sports. And this was one of them. So I had not really heard of it. I think I had heard maybe the headlines or something. And I'm like, what the heck? And I didn't really follow it until I heard her episode of this story. But now the story has recently made a resurgence on Netflix because a docuseries came out actually that's called Untold. And the episode that we're going to discuss is the double episode called The Girlfriend Who Didn't Exist. And it's the story of football player Manti Te'o, who was a celebrated linebacker who played for Notre Dame. And then he played for the San Diego Chargers and later on the New Orleans Saints briefly. But if you've ever heard the name Manti Te'o, it's probably in reference to this case. It's one of the most covered, the biggest kind of blown up story about catfishing incidents on record. I guess first, maybe Lorena, we just want to say briefly what catfishing is. Did you want to?
Sure. So catfishing essentially is, and note that this case, it all blew up before catfishing was even a thing, before the show Catfish even came out. So catfishing essentially is when somebody makes a fake online profile with real photos of a real person, uses a fake name, and just creates this fictional persona to gain either money, love interest, revenge. A few of the episodes that I've watched on catfishing is for revenge. And they really trick these people into believing that they are the person that they are saying online, who they are online. And 9 out of 10 times, it's not the real person. Some people can get really affected by this. For example, Manti Te'o, we'll come to find out that his entire career was affected because of this catfishing scandal.
Yeah, and the catfishing, when they're doing this, when they're connecting with this person as this fake persona, it's for a relationship. It really goes to relationship, like a romantic relationship most of the time. That's the way we mostly understand it, is a romantic relationship. So yeah, it started in 2009. So in 2009, Manti Te'o was then a freshman at Notre Dame. And he began a friendship over Facebook with a woman named Lennay Kukua. So it turned out, this turned into a long-distance romance that lasted for about 3 years. But the couple never met face-to-face. And that's another thing about catfishing that we'll learn about. And Lennay, we'll find out, was hiding a very big secret. Now, do we want to say right now, like everything, like just put it out there? If we want to just let the cat out of the bag, or we want to...
I think the title of the docuseries kind of lets the cat out of the bag, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. but there's elements to it that are also more interesting than even that, right?
Did you watch the docuseries, Bob?
I did, yeah. And I don't know, when you guys picked this, did you do it on purpose, knowing that?
Well, we talked about this in Kansas City. Well, maybe you don't remember.
That's what I was going to ask you, because I was going to ask you that. Like, I don't even know, because, okay, here's what happened. This is the only thing I know, is that when we went to Kansas City, Lorena and I rented an Airbnb, and we're hanging out there the first night. It's really nice living room. It's got Netflix. It's got everything, right? And having drinks or whatever. And she said, "Oh, have you seen this show, Untold, about this?" And she told me it was the Manti Te'o case. I said, "Oh, I know. I kind of remember that case." So we watched it, and I thought it was great. I mean, we just kind of just got into it. So then when we got back, and she said she had talked to you about doing something together because we're planning the December episodes. and she said, oh, yeah, I talked to Bob about doing the Manti Te'o case. So I wondered, I had no idea. I never did ask why you talked to him about this
Bob
case.
and I were chatting, and he was like, oh, I went to Notre Dame. And I was like, oh, do you know about Manti Te'o? And then you and I kind of had a conversation about how, football is, everything.
Yeah. So I didn't go to school there. See,
you didn't.
It was
Sorry.
Lorena that had too many drinks.
Okay. Now we're getting the true story.
The truth comes out.
I thought about going with it for a minute. I'm like, I could put in University of Notre Dame graduate on my resume. Let's do it. But no, I live 5 minutes from Notre Dame's campus.
Oh, okay.
Like literally, I can, on a clear day, can see the Golden Dome from my backyard.
Wow.
And I've always been a big Notre Dame fan growing up right here. So I live in Michigan, but just barely over the border. So I was like very intimately following that season and Manti Te'o's football career when all of this happened.
So anyway, that's how that came about, apparently. None of
it's because Lorena thought that I went to college at Notre Dame.
Okay, Notre Dame was brought up, and then whether if I went there, I live close to there. I was like, oh, perfect. He'll know about the culture and how everything not necessarily unfolded, but just really kind of give insight of, do you remember press conferences and even just news headlines at the time? I'm sure they were, the local newspapers and stuff were probably.
It was awful. It was, at first nobody felt bad for Manti Te'o because the way it was presented at first was that he was pulling a fast one over, like trying to get sympathy because his grandmother had passed away, and then he talked about in this press conference before the game that his girlfriend had also passed away, and then we find out she didn't exist, and the immediate reaction was he's scamming everyone, like he's trying to get sympathy by telling us that this woman that did it. It wasn't until quite a little while later, the way I remember it, before I realized oh no, he really believed that he was being scammed. But then as you see in the docuseries, that turns into, oh, well, so he's an idiot. And it kind of ruined, not just, he didn't let it ruin his life, but it definitely changed his life.
Right.
Totally. It completely changed the trajectory of his career. And who knows where he would have been as far as if he would have won the Heisman. And
I had real actual feelings about this, not even just thoughts when I was watching it. And like I said, I watched it in Kansas City and then watched it again. And there's some things here. I like the way, and I wanted to talk about this generally about the documentary, generally the way they put it together before we get into the details. But I thought they did a really good job of the way that they presented it, because they had the person who was doing the catfishing, and then they had Manti Te'o, and they had his family, and they had, the coaches and some of his friends and other people who were involved in the story. And they did it around interviews of them telling the story. Now, this is updated because this happened from 2009 to 2012 is when all this took place. I believe 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. And so this documentary just came out this year in August. So now they kind of updated kind of what's happened, but they really kind of stuck to the story from the beginning, like who he was and how this unfolded and all of that. But I thought they did a good job of it. But I think what they did, though, is they let everybody tell the story in their own way. And what that afforded the viewer, I think, is that you could look at these people, listen to what they had to say about it, get a sense of who they were or who they are now, and then decide for yourself. What do you think about these people? Because they didn't tell you how to think about either the perpetrator of the hoax or Manti or his family. But I have thoughts and feelings about all of them. So what did you guys kind of take away from just generally from the documentary?
I agree with you, Esther, that they did such a great job, especially with all the interviews and how many people they interviewed. I mean, for me, the football team just really, I can only imagine the amount of stress he was under. But yeah, even the football coaches, when everything came out, the director that they were interviewing, they're like, we can't have this kind of stuff come out. He was the perfect picture athlete that Notre Dame wanted at the time. He was into his faith. He was a great student, family, leadership, everything that they wanted. And for something like this to come out, like as soon as it came out, it was, yes, they supported him and stuff, but they were trying to get a hold of it before it became this big thing. And unfortunately, it did become a big thing. And I can only imagine how lonely he must have felt. One, his grandmother passed away. Now he thinks his girlfriend passed away. He doesn't even know if the girlfriend exists. Like, I can only imagine the severity of like how he felt. That's what like really got to me.
I'm glad that the documentary was made because, you know, it came and went and he was the butt of jokes nationwide, worldwide, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I was glad that we got to actually hear, and from the perpetrator of the hoax, what happened and how elaborate that it was. That he wasn't just some idiot who got, he was just he was too trusting, and he got sucked into this thing. I felt that though they didn't tell you how to think, but I found myself as a quasi journalist when and forget, I can't remember the name of the woman that was the catfisher,
Ronaiah.
Ronaiah, yeah. But I was like, I can't, like, will somebody ask her, like, how do you, like, ask her some hard questions? Like, how do you, like, it felt like where I'm supposed to, because, you know, she was going through this gender identity kind of crisis, I guess, for herself, and then she found herself now in the trans community, and that's all great. I'm glad that happened, but it was like, no, that you're still a horrible, rotten person. like that's not like I'm here for you. I'm here to like support and help you in your transition and all these things, but that doesn't give you the right to destroy somebody's fucking life like you did. And so I felt like, and I guess you're right, Esther, that they didn't really tell you how to think, but I had this kind of overwhelming feeling like, no, are you trying to get us to give her a pass? Because what she did was horrible. It was horrible, and it was deliberate. And that part bothered me a little bit, but I was glad to see Manti Te'o like have his chance to give his side of the story, because like you said, Lorena, he was not only like the perfect like Notre Dame athlete, but he was a bad MFer too. Like I mean, this guy would have been a first round draft pick for millions of dollars. He was, in my opinion, the best linebacker in college football that year. I mean, he was unstoppable. He was just a beast. And then because of this, and it makes me mad at like these NFL teams, like really, like, why would you take, because this happened to him, you passed up on an incredible athlete that could have been an asset because you didn't want to deal with the drama or whatever it was. Like, I don't know. It was frustrating that happened to him.
Yeah, you're right. And that's a couple of things that I definitely wanted to both of those points were things that I wanted to bring up. So Manti Te'o is Polynesian, and he was born in Hawaii. So he was born in a little tiny place called Laia. I think it's Laia. I think that's how you say it. It's it's on the island of Oahu. So, and they talk about this, that it's a very small, close-knit community. It's a large population belong to the Church of Latter-day Saints. So, and he, you know, from the get, what you see is he's just a very disciplined person, just from a child, you know, and for him, it was all about family, it was all about faith, and it was all about football. And he says that several times. And really, his whole family it revolves around that. And he... one of the things that Lorena pulled out is that 5 years old, his father asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he said, "I want to be the best." And so this was him, like you said, turns into this beast because he's just this very driven guy and worked his ass off, you know, to be that. Mm-hmm. And so that's who he was. But he needed a scholarship. So he knew he wanted to play football, and he needed a scholarship. And he had tons of offers. He had like over 50 offers to play for, you know, all these colleges. And I guess a lot of his family members went to USC, something like that, or he knew a lot of people that went to USC, or USC was their team or something like that, which is the University of Southern California. And at the last minute, he felt he got a sign from God to go play for Notre Dame, which was like totally out of his wheelhouse, right?
Yeah.
Like a Polynesian guy at Notre Dame. First of all, the weather. Okay. let's talk the weather.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, but he went there and, he did, like you said, he did awesome. I mean, was it, Bob, do you remember like when he first got there and the games first started, like, was that people really took notice of him right away, or was it something that built up over time?
Yeah. Or was it like anticipated? Was Notre Dame and the town excited to have him? Like, did they know who he was beforehand?
I don't know about that, but I'm not as into, if my brother was on here, he would be able to answer that better, because he's like the guy that knows, like I, turn on the season opener and watch him play and then start to figure out who everybody is. But he's one of the guys that is like paying attention to stuff like that, who the new people coming in are. But I can tell you, by the time by his sophomore year playing, like he was noticeable. Like he was the guy on the team that you look to hold the defense together. And Notre Dame had several bad seasons leading up to that, and he was like leading them to finally a winning season, or to a very successful season. So yeah, there was definitely a lot of hype around him. But I still remember when we all thought at the end of his junior year that he would go to the NFL. Mm-hmm. He was that good, and everybody expected him, but a lot of people, myself included, had a lot of respect for him. But yes, he always said that football was a means for him to get his education. And so he decided to pass up these multi-million-dollar contracts in the NFL to finish his college education and stay for his senior year, which turned out to be, his senior year is when kind of his football career then fell apart because of this scandal. But yeah, he could have, a year before that, he could have walked away and went into the NFL. He was that good even as a junior.
Right. Yeah. One of the things they show in the documentary is this opening game. So that would have been his freshman year. That was Notre Dame versus Wolfpack of Nevada. And that was, I guess, one of their main. I have no idea. They're big rivals or something, big game, something. I mean, look, it was very exciting. I love watching, just the clips that they showed. Yeah. It was very exciting. But he, that was the kind of the first time he was on a big stage. It was like 80,000 people in the stadium, and 80,000 people really at Notre Dame. That's huge. I would love to go to one of those games. That sounds awesome. Sounds like it'd be really fun. But they said, his reputation preceded him. So people, I guess, were excited about that game to see what he could do. Yeah. And he just became this huge star. And like you said, they had been going through a tough time, Notre Dame. They talk about that in the documentary. And so he was kind of their saving grace, kind of. And also bringing the energy back, which is always important for a team, right? Bringing the energy back to the crowds to come, because we know that, the people and the players, they feed off each other, off that energy. And so it just became this whole thing, and everybody was really excited about it. And that went on for 3 years, right? Like 3 seasons he was playing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. And he was too. He was a playmaker where, it would be the game, how much you follow football, but, it'd be that third and long situation where you think that they're gonna the other team's gonna get the first down or march down the field, and it was always Te'o that would somehow break through the line into the backfield and sack the quarterback or block the punt, or it was like he was always somehow the big playmaker that got everybody excited and changed the momentum of games.
Yeah, I mean that just sounds.
People loved him. I mean, yeah. They were bringing lays to the games and, chatting his name and, creating their own jerseys with his number and everything. So, yeah, people adored him. And then we find out, it turned on him.
Yeah. So really his time at Notre Dame and his relationship with this online person started around the same time, pretty much at the same time. And we'll talk a little bit about her. So the person's name, the catfisher, who we're going to talk about, is Ronaiah, which also goes by Naya. Okay. I wish I was Polynesian. I love these names, but they're super hard to say if you're not Polynesian.
Yeah, that's why I didn't even try.
I know there's more than I'm just trying to figure out how many syllables are in there. Tuiasosopo, something like that. There's an extra syllable I always miss. But anyway, went by the name Lennay Kukua online, which is easier to say. And also came from a very, a Polynesian background, big football family. So her dad played for USC. Her uncle played for the Rams. Her cousin played for the Rams. And one of her other cousins played for the 49ers. So, I mean, and of course, and one thing you need to know is Ronaiah, by Ronaiah, was male, was not a female, but created this female persona, Lennay Kukua, which was a female persona. But, you know, he grew up as a boy, and that's what he presented as a child and as a young man in his family. And they all expected him to also go into play football, because that's what you do in their family, apparently. But he hated football. And but the other thing that ties him to Manti is their faith, right? They all supposed to grew up in the church, you know, around church. The whole family's around church. Was also very active in the ministry in their town. I don't want to confuse anybody, because we are going to refer to her as her, because what you'll see in the documentary, from the beginning of the documentary, she's now transgendered and she goes by Naya. And so it's just, that's the way, you know, she presents, and that's the way that the story is told. But just know that, you know, gender assigned at birth was male. And so we know this. She knew from an early age that she identified as female. And that was one of the reasons that she created this online persona to be Lennay Kukua, because she wanted to embody who she felt she was. But then she's connecting with people who believe this is who she is. And she doesn't tell them, hey, you know, I'm transgender, or I identify as, or whatever. She just goes by Lennay and basically presents herself as female. So that's, we need to know from the jump. But she also had to find pictures of, or something to present, you know, because she wasn't transgender yet at the time. She was still, you know, presented as a male. So she took pictures and information from a girl she knew who was popular in her high school named Diane O'Meara. And she used her pictures exclusively to kind of show that, you know, this is her, or put those pictures out like that. So that's kind of how that she said, it was me with a different name tag, a photo, but as far as everything else, it was 100% me. And what she means is the things she would talk about and the things that she said she was interested in, and, you know, how she talked to people was her, but she was using an identity of somebody else, which is already right there to me, fraud. Hello. You know, like, I didn't like that, you know, because she didn't use her name, but she used her likeness. She was taking her pictures from social media, using those as her own. She said that this woman was a student at Stanford University. So, you know, made up all this stuff. Wondery, creator of shows like Dr. Death, Scamfluencers, and Over My Dead Body, now goes even deeper into complex true crime stories to give you an inside look at the facts. Wondery is launching the ultimate true crime fan destination, Exhibit-C. It's truly criminal. Dive deep into the most devious scams, manipulative cults, and the coldest of cases. Wondery's Exhibit-C lets you view all the evidence through a detective's lens, taking you step by step through the twists and turns of each true crime case. Join the Exhibit-C online community to access exclusive show merchandise, member-only content, and to hear directly from top criminal and social justice experts, witnesses, and investigators as they take us beyond the evidence and into the case file. I love to interact with the Exhibit-C community on Facebook to get updates on cases I've followed on The Vanished, as well as to interact with other true crime fans who are discussing cold cases, breaking true crime news, and what they're listening to. Join now by following Wondery-Exhibit-C on Facebook, or find it on the web at Wondery-Exhibit-C.com. And listen to true crime podcasts on Wondery and Amazon Music. Exhibit-C. It's truly criminal. Okay, so they connect in 2009, and you can watch the documentary to see how all this, but it's all on Facebook, right? It's all over Facebook.
And this is like when Facebook first came out. So it was totally normal to like add people who you like once met from a different college, a different university, whatever. So she was randomly adding different men. She would build a little bit of a relationship with them. And then as soon as they were like, hey, let's FaceTime, or hey, let's, you know, try to meet, she would have to cut it off because, obviously it wasn't the real person. And she had seen that her and Manti had like a mutual friend. It was one of her cousin's mutual friends. And so she added him as a friend. I think he actually was the first one that was like, hey, what's up? And then she was like, oh, I know your cousin. And then that's when Manti actually called his cousin, was like, hey, like, do you know this girl Lennay? And he's like, oh yeah, like I know Lennay through Facebook. And so that's kind of how it happened. So already in Manti's head, he's like, oh, she's real. And then as they became, more connected, because background family in football, their faith was very similar. That's how they were really able to connect. Throughout the documentary, you'll see text messages between them where she's giving him advice like, hey, keep your head down, make sure you're squatting lower, really giving these in-depth details of how to not only be, a better person, but also a better football player. And that's where he says she was the whole package in one. And that's why he really did fall for her in his head. And gosh, he was so young too. He wasn't thinking like this could be fake. He had a cousin vouch saying, oh, she's real. And gosh, she knows so much. Like, she's got to be real. There's no way this could be fake. So
that's what I was going to ask you.
And you got to remember the time. You were talking 2009. No one was thinking that someone would be fake on the internet, exactly. Like the whole idea of, I mean, there were people, of course, that were like, you don't know who that really is in the other line, but that was just like something you said, but the TV show Catfishing, Catfish hadn't come out yet. Like, no one, I don't think anybody in that time would think, hey, this person who my cousin knows that I'm really connecting with, it's not even that they thought, oh, she's real, but I don't think there would ever been even a thought of whether or not she's real. It would just be like, oh, it's somebody my cousin knows, and I hit it off with her, and that's it. I certainly never would have questioned it back then.
Well, that's what I was,
a beautiful girl.
That's what I was. Well, that was my next question, because we have a guy here, so I need to ask if you were like, and the thing is, what you guys need to understand is it wasn't just over Facebook. They were having phone calls, okay, but. Let's just say it was just over Facebook and maybe a phone call here or there, whatever. And he is connecting with this person, like you said, Loretta, who has all of these similarities with him. And I'm just thinking, okay, would that be enough for a man to just say, hey, I just want to stay connected to this woman. I really like her. And even if you have a niggling kind of thing, like, I don't know if this is real, that you would dismiss it? Or would it be something that you like, no, I got to check this chick out and see if this is for real? Like, what would you, as a guy, what would your instinct be?
I'm so far out of touch. I'm so old. Listen, I was married 10 years before this happened. I was married years before.
Come on,
Facebook
Bob, you're still a man.
You mean you met your wife in person before?
Yeah, in
online?
person. Yeah, when this happened, I had a 4-year-old son. So I've never experienced this. I wouldn't know what the hell to do if I was like trying to be in the dating scene right now, because there's no freaking way I'm getting on some app and I'm looking through. I just would like meet a person, you hit it off, the good old days.
Yeah. Know that they're in the flesh, they're real.
Yeah. I mean, granted, I was around, I was in high school during the or like a freshman in college during like the AOL instant messenger days, where you got on there and chatted with people. And I remember like being at a friend's house who had AOL, and I remember vaguely going into they call them chat rooms, where you could like go in with like some subject and like start chatting with people, and then you could go on to instant message. But that was like the extent of my online dating right there was 45 minutes in a chat room on AOL.
Yeah. But this becomes a problem because of course they're connecting online, never met in person for a couple of years. And of course, Manti, he's like, hey, when are we going to meet? When are we going to meet? I want to see you. I want to see you. I want to see you. Of course, she starts getting a little nervous because that can't happen. It blow up the whole relationship because he doesn't even know who she really is. So she decides to do something a little bit drastic. So it was in 2011, he gets a text from supposedly Lennay's cousin that says that Lennay was in a car accident and got hit by a drunk driver and is on life support in the hospital. So this is the part where I'm with you, Bob, that come on, this is horrible. You know, what she starts doing is really horrible because she creates, I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, this happened or whatever. It's another thing that she's playing these parts of all these people, like the cousin calls him and puts him on the phone and he can hear just her breathing through a breathing tube. And, you know, and he's talking to her every day because she's not responsive. And I mean, come on, how do you do that? How do you sleep at night knowing that you are, you know, I mean, this guy thinks that he really cares about you and you're pretending that you are basically on death's door, you know, for days or weeks or whatever it is. I mean, that's at another level of being just horrible.
But you know what? That's one thing that what you had mentioned earlier as far as the production of the documentary that I thought was great was the fact that this documentary wouldn't really have worked without Ronaiah being part of it, because otherwise, like, could you imagine if it was just Manti telling that story? Like, still people probably wouldn't believe him. You know, like, sure, you're going to say that's what happened, but I think that was the great thing about this was the fact that Ronaiah was a part of it too. And so what you got was that constant back and forth of every one of these stories. You heard Manti telling about the story and the Ronaiah telling, you know, confirming the story and then talking about why she did it and things like that. But I think that's what made the documentary so powerful, and hopefully it had an impact on Te'o's life. Because, like, there's no question. It's not like there's no question that either he's not making this crap up. She's there saying, no, yeah, I did that. That's what I did to him.
Yeah, right. Not only did she, you know, she's trying to battle back from this car accident. She's in the hospital at the same time. She doubles down and then says that, or has somebody say or let him know that while she's battling in the hospital for, you know, after this accident, that she also was diagnosed with leukemia. I mean, why? Why? You know what I mean? What is going on here in this person's brain to want to do that? It's a very strange story. And I mean, obviously she's got a very complicated psychology going on. So, okay. So then she's going to make it, right? But she's still healing up. She's out of the hospital. She's healing up, all this kind of stuff. This around the time is when he, like you said, Bob, says he's going to stay for the senior year at Notre Dame. And then he's starting to ask her more, like, oh, you know, I want to see you. I want to, you know, see you, whatever. But then he starts getting a lot more, you know, busy with football. And like you said, he's the celebrity and he's getting called away a lot and he's doing interviews and all this stuff. And I think what happens is that she gets jealous because he doesn't have as much time for her. And because that's what it sounded like. There was a little bit of a switch there as part of the documentary. And so I think what she decided to do was, you know, she felt like she was losing him. She wanted to do something. She decided to do something drastic, which was even more cruel. And she fakes her own death. And it happens to be, and I don't know, it doesn't say whether she knew about the fact that his grandmother had died that same day when supposedly she calls as his sister or somebody and says that she passed because she lost her battle with leukemia and she dies. And it was the same day that he learned that his grandmother had passed away. So now that becomes a story, right? That, my God, this guy lost both this girlfriend who was, you know, had this illness and his grandmother on the same day because he goes out and he plays that same day Notre Dame versus Michigan State, right? And it becomes this big deal that he just was, you know, amazing on the field and everything. And at the same time, this happened. So now it becomes this huge story, which she didn't consider. Nobody thought would happen. So do you remember that at all? That game or anything about that? Was that something where you watching?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So it was a huge.
Oh, yeah, I was watching it. Yeah, and I said, like, he was like, everybody already loved the guy, and then like you hear that, you know, that all these horrible things happened to him, and then, you know, he's gonna go out and he's gonna do, you know, play the game. It was like that Rudy-esque. They always talk about, you know, they keep talking about the documentary like Rudy. It was that type of Notre Dame amazing, harrowing story. And then he went out and had an amazing game, and it was so it was like it went real quick from that to everything falling apart right afterwards, because at that point we thought he really did lose his grandmother, which he did. and we thought he really did lose his girlfriend at the same time, and that he's still, sticking it out and is going to play the game and be there for his team. And so everybody loved him to the moon and back by the end of that game.
Yeah, and it becomes this huge story that not only gets, it's not even just a college football story, but it's like a nationwide story. This is where people first heard outside of this, outside of Notre Dame or outside of this community about Manti Te'o, really. Outside of even football, right? People just were like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. He brings them to the national championships. He is, they're saying he's a no-brainer to be a first round draft pick. He's a Heisman Trophy candidate. It's this huge thing. And then, of course, he's, they're wanting to talk to him about this terrible double loss that he had. So he's doing all these interviews and things like that. It just kind of happens. Sports Illustrated, he's on the cover. I mean, it's just crazy. It becomes huge, a huge sports story, and just a feel good, survivor kind of story thing or whatever. Which, of course, somebody is going to say, wait a minute, that just sounds too good. Because, again, it's that whole football, like you said, the mythology around it, right? Right. It's like, oh, are they making this up because, Notre Dame really needed this. They really needed this at that time.
Yeah.
Right. And so a couple of, young journalists start thinking, well, this maybe, let's check into this a little bit. Let's find out. So they do. And these were reporters for Deadspin, which was a sports blog. Right. I guess they covered, sports stories, some pop culture that kind of came later, but it was mostly sports at the beginning. But OK, here's the thing that I didn't get, and maybe you guys did. They said they got a tip, but we never find out who that was.
Who tipped them? Yeah, I tried to actually research that last night because that was one of the main questions that I had too. Yeah, there was never any insight of who the tip was. It just says, you might be interested in this story. Manti Te'o is a hoax. There was never a girlfriend. And so that's ultimately what this story is about, how people don't fact check. And ESPN and like Esther saying, this story went from just, all-star football player to this heartfelt feel-good story nationwide. It was on CNN, it was on Fox News, it was everywhere. When you turned on your TV and the sports section came up, it was all about not just how great of a football player he was, but because of the dead girlfriend and the dead grandmother. Nobody thought to fact check it or say, how old was the girlfriend, or where did they meet? How did they meet? This is like where the documentary turns, and it becomes more of the story of like, no, we weren't trying to go after Manti. We were trying to go after ESPN and the big news companies for not fact checking and getting their story straight.
Right. So they did their due diligence because they're real journalists who actually did research. And, the first thing was, obviously, come on, this person was in this car crash. We know the name. First of all, nobody by that name they could find. Then they start doing reverse Google searches on the pictures and stuff, and they have to go through all of these things to find out who this person maybe is. And they do finally find Diane O'Meara, and she didn't know anything, of course, about this. Right before this thing breaks, for whatever reason, Lennay decides that she's not dead anymore. And she says, calls him. I think it all had to do with wanting his attention. And if she's, it's over, she's got no part in it. And she says, oh, it's me. And I don't even know what the hell kind of story you tell somebody to say, oh, I thought, was dead, but I'm not. And it's just so ridiculous. And of course, his head is like, what the hell's going on? He's just like, so that's kind of messing him up already. So then he's trying to figure that out. And then at the same time, this thing happens, where somebody is now like going to expose this. Right. And like you said, it happened within a couple of days. Everything just kind of came out.
Well, the timing was really, if I remember correctly and understood from the documentary, right, it was like he had like a big press conference leading up to the bowl game or whatever it was before that game, and like in the moments before that, he got this phone call and it was like, well, now there's this person saying she's not dead. I don't know what to believe. And that's what he was really kind of attacked for, I think, was because he went and did that press conference knowing at that point, we think that he knows that she's not really dead. But I think what was really going on was he was like, well, now I don't know. Like, certainly she, like, I think he thought, I feel like he thought that was the hoax, the person calling him saying, no, that I'm still, but
that makes more sense.
The docuseries gets into that. About how he was just like so torn because he's going up to speak and like, what is he going to say? I just got a phone call from my dead girlfriend and she's not dead.
Actually,
like,
he
just didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah, good news. Yeah. Oh my God, so crazy. So the Alabama Dynasty Notre Dame national championship game, which went very wrong because again, he's messed up in the head. I don't know. And also they said, it just was a very tough game. That was on January 7th, 2013. And so it was like a week later on January 16th, Deadspin decides finally they've got everything that they need and they published the expose. They did try to get, I guess, statements from the team or for him or whatever. But basically at this point, they're saying, everybody's telling him just lay low, because Notre Dame doesn't want to look like morons, right?
Right.
So they're just, we don't know how to deal with this. We got to figure out what's going on and whatever. And they just, waited too long and Deadspin just said, we got to publish. So they published, they said, well, somebody else is going to find out, that's how it is in the news game. And they published on January 16th, this article saying Manti Te'o's dead girlfriend, the most heartbreaking and inspirational story of the college football season is a hoax. And the journalists that wrote that were Tim Burke and Jack Dickey. And now this just blows up and they're all over, on everything. They're on Anderson Cooper. They're on, everything and talking about it. One thing you said, Lorena, is about he goes, he must have felt so alone. And he talks about that going into, they told him to stay put, but he went into the football facility to work out like he normally does. And he said, I walk in the locker room and everybody just silence. This is his teammates, just silence. Nobody talks to him. Like, I guess they don't know what to say or whatever. And he's like, all right, well, I guess I'm on my own here. Like so much for, band of brothers kind of thing. Like they don't know what to do with this and they're not going to be there. I'm going to have to figure this out. You know what drives me crazy? When I get a notification telling me that I just paid for a subscription I forgot about and I no longer use. Did you know that 80% of us have subscriptions we forgot about? Maybe it's a streaming service you don't even watch, or a digital magazine subscription that you haven't read in months or even years. Now I've learned how to easily stop wasting money on subscriptions because there's a great app that helps me keep track of all my expenses. You might have heard of it. It's called Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill. You can stop wasting hundreds of dollars on subscriptions you no longer use. Think of what you can do with that extra money. Pay off bills, save for something you do use. The Rocket Money app shows you all your subscriptions in one place and then cancels for you whatever you don't still want. You can find subscriptions you didn't know you were even paying for, or even stop double charges. It happens. Get rid of useless subscriptions with Rocket Money now. Go to rocketmoney.com/once. Seriously, it could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/once. Cancel your unnecessary subscriptions right now at rocketmoney.com/once. So the comments that come out, though, because people find out that Lennay is a man named Ronaiah Tuiasosopo, which I can't say. But we'll leave it at that because that's funny. But, and it's like, first of all, fake. And then the next, immediately was like, oh, he created this because he is secretly gay. And that becomes a thing.
Right.
Which, like you said, Deadspin said there was that wasn't even at all our focus of this. Our focus was exposing the big journalist outlets for sports, like Sports Illustrated and ESPN, who did not do their research, who just ran with the story and did not do their research. That's who we wanted to make look foolish, not Manti. Of course, he's caught up in it. What are you going to do about that? They start asking, how could he be so naive? And then
I don't know if I buy that. I think they I think they wanted a juicy story.
Oh, for sure.
Like I don't buy for a minute that they were like, this is going to attack ESPN and surely nothing will happen to Manti Te'o. They didn't think that.
No.
Like, they knew what they were doing. Give me a break.
Even if they were, because I think there is some journalistic ego to say, hey, we're this little blog and we got this story and you guys didn't even look. And so we're going to make you look like idiots. But they had to know he was collateral damage. They had to know. There's no way.
Yeah, obviously.
You know?
Yeah. And I've always wondered if the tipster wasn't Ronaiah.
I did
herself.
too. I did.
That's what we were talking about.
Who else knew to be able to call in that tip to tell people? Like, if it was like truly, and it seems like she was like intentionally trying to hurt him. I think you're probably right. I think it was Esther. You had said like there was some jealousy or something, but this was the way it was made out. There was like, I was just looking for a way out. I didn't know what to do. No bullshit. Like she was intentionally trying to devastate and destroy him,
right?
Doing all, the car accident, the leukemia, and then she died, saying she died. I think it stands to reason that it could have been her than to say, well, now I'm really going to embarrass him and call in a tip, so that now the whole world knows.
I could totally buy that too. And one of the reasons I say that is because we said we're going to talk about her before we end is, and who, what we really think about her, because what the next thing you see is that he's going through this whole thing where he's just being ripped to shreds. He's being ripped to shreds. They're saying, he knew, he's a fraud, he's this, he's that, he's the other thing. I mean, even it's just one of these things where they're just totally tearing him down. Okay, I'm sorry, but I have to bring up the part about the Dr. Phil show. The Dr. Phil show, where they show him. The whole thing, that whole scene where you see somebody standing and you don't see who it is until he finally sits in the chair all slowly. It's Dr. Phil putting on his lav, and all that. I'm like, this guy's such a friggin' egomaniac, man. You would have punched him right in the face. And he's enjoying this way too much. Oh my God.
Hey, somewhere, some showrunner created that scene in their mind. Like, it'd be great.
Yeah. Place the camera.
Yeah, we're going to place this. We're going to be in a dark room and then sit down slowly. This is going to be amazing.
Because oh God. And then she's on. Come on. I'm like, why? But that makes sense of you saying that she was a tipster. Why would she go on, to the Dr. Phil show unless she wanted that? She wanted that. She's like, oh, I wanted to tell my story. No, you think you wanted to be the story from the beginning. There's something about that. Because one of the things, too, that she talks about in the documentary, because you were saying this, Bob, is that everybody was saying, well, wait a minute, how could she do all these voices? And that was one of the things they do in there is he has her sit behind this thing and like doing a phone call as the female voice that he said, because he had voicemails on his cell phone that he played that sounded like a woman. And he's like, okay, Dr. Phil's like, no, that can't be you. That there had to be somebody else involved or something or whatever. And so she sits behind this thing and she does the voice and she's dead on, and nobody would think it wasn't who she said she was. Right.
Right.
But when they start saying, oh, all these different people, and they're saying, oh, it had to be multiple people and all this. She sits there, and I swear, I watched this like 3 times. I kept rewinding it, and she sits there, and she is so friggin' proud of herself that she pulled off this hoax single-handedly. She said, it was all me. And she's sitting, with her arms crossed like, it was me. And I'm like, wow, that narcissist, man, totally into this. Totally wanted to be the star of this whole, thing. So that makes sense what you said, that she could have very well been the tipster for sure, which takes us to a whole nother level on this.
She says, if what she's saying is true, that it was all her, that no one else knew, like who else could have called it in?
Right.
You know what I mean? No one else knew about it.
Right. Yeah. So maybe she just shut herself in the foot with that. But I don't know. But they didn't really, they didn't give commentary about this. They just let her tell the story, which I like, because then I can think for myself and think, well, what do I think? And like you said, Lorena, his prospects after that point were greatly diminished. He was not, he's going to be first round draft pick as 2013 draft, and didn't happen, and people were shocked that, he wasn't. His second round he was, but by that time how much are you losing as far,
millions of dollars after the first
crazy.
round of the NFL draft.
Yeah.
To date, he's made 10.4 million, and that's only a quarter of what he could have made if it wasn't for the catfishing scandal, because not only the draft pick, the round of the draft pick, because once you go from the first round to the second round, it goes from millions to like hundreds of thousands, but also all the endorsements.
Yeah.
Not only did teams want, him to play for them, companies didn't want to work with him after all of this, especially, when the whole rumor of him being gay and him knowing, they just all backed out. During this time, I don't know if you knew this, Bob, or if you remember this happening. Manti actually also witnessed a fellow student pass away during a football practice. He was a media guy. He was up on a 50-foot hydraulic lift, and it was a windy day. And the 20-year-old Declan Sullivan fell off of the forklift, and Manti Te'o was there on the field when it happened, and he actually kneeled down and prayed with him while it happened. Do you remember that happening?
Oh yeah, I remember that vividly. It happened right down the street from me. It was an awful situation. The guy was up, filming for the practice, and on a windy day, and it was really messed up because it came out that he had literally, I think it was Facebook, he had like made a Facebook post while he was up there, tweeted, minutes before it happened, something to the extent of like, I'm going to die up here because of all this wind. Then literally did moments later.
Oh, that's awful.
At 3:22, he said, just as practice was beginning, he said, gusts of wind up to 60 miles per hour. Well, today will be fun at work. I guess I've lived long enough. And then at 4:06, he posted another tweet. Holy shit, this is terrifying. And then shortly after he fell, and then
God, that's horrible.
So add that all on top of everything else that Manti is going through. He witnessed a fellow student who also was obviously part of the football family, because he recorded football games and practices go through this. And
and then he starts playing for the Chargers and stuff, but he's heckled at every game. He's heckled at every game. There's all of these memes and things and making fun of him and the fake girlfriend. Even if they decided, I guess, after all of these things came out, when she came out and The Voice and all this, the calls and everything, it's like, okay, he's not in on it. But now they're just calling him, like you said, Bob. Now they switched to, he's an idiot. He's an idiot.
Right.
And one of the things, I was watching the end of this, and I wrote at the end of the notes is, this came to my mind, is the only thing that people love more than a hero story is to tear down that hero. People love that. It's like, it just, it's like you only want to get so much attention, and then you go above that and people cannot wait to knock you down. It's like you want to be somewhere in the middle, in the sweet spot, right? Because it's
terrible too with him, because it seems like from all accounts, like he's just a pretty wonderful human being. And so it was also good because, I kind of forgot about this after it happened. So it was good to see in the documentary that he seems to be, either I missed it or they didn't really get into exactly what he's up to nowadays.
I did look it up.
I know he's married now.
Yeah, he's married. He played with.
He seems to be doing well. I was glad about that.
Yeah, he played for the Chargers in 2013 to 2016. He did have some injuries then, and then he was with the New Orleans Saints from 2017 to 2019, and then he played with the Chicago Bears practice squad, and I don't even know what that is, from 2020 to 2021. And he did play in one game, I believe, in one actual game. And after that, I don't know if his football career is over. I haven't seen anything else. He got married.
He's a free agent right now.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah. So still with the NFL. He's still, getting paid through his contracts, but he's just a free agent. So he could be picked up by a team.
Yeah. He got married in 2020, in summer 2020. And they had a daughter, and they named Hiro, Hiro, a year after that. So, he says, he's happy, and, he's just a very motivated person, just, still very connected to his family, and, really leans on his faith to get him through, because he went through a lot of anxiety, started seeing a therapist, all that kind of stuff to deal with all this. Ronaiah, just to wrap it up, she moved back to American Samoa. And the reason she says that is because she joined the LGBT community there, which she says is more widely accepted to be transgender. There is actually no designation for transgender, she said, in American Samoa or in Polynesia. So it's easier for her to live a life as trans there. So she was there for a while. She now lives and works in Carson, California, which I think is where she was from originally, somewhere in that area. And she lives with her mother, I believe, and keeps a low profile. But I had a lot of thoughts about her. I didn't like her. I didn't feel sympathetic for her. Maybe I would have if she hadn't have taken it to this place, and really ruined this guy who, like you said, by all accounts is just a great person, just a great heart. And one thing I did want to say, though, is one of the things that I think plays into this that they didn't talk a lot about, but you could see it in the documentary, is the expectation of his family, of who he was supposed to be, right? He's supposed to be this very, just perfect person. He's supposed to be the best player, the good student. And man, talk about a lot of pressure, but I don't even think he recognized that, because it was just such a part of who he was from the get. But I really did see a lot of pressure even from the family and his community from the beginning. And that had to play into all of this, had to, I don't know what that's like because I don't listen to anybody. I do what I want. You should do this. Exactly. Should. Yeah, take your shoulds and shove them. It's like we're podcasters, Bob. We don't live in shoulds.
Right.
We do what we want. We are making this up as we go along. We don't know what the hell we're doing.
That's all we have to do. We have no boss except for the thousands of listeners that tell us what we do wrong.
Yeah. And then if you read the comments, or if you don't, that's on you.
Yeah, right.
So any last thoughts? Because that was about all I had.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I'm glad you did, because I don't do a lot of TV, so it forced me to sit down and watch the documentary or the docuseries, and it was really good. I think everybody should check it out, because it's a really good story, and it's nice to actually hear the other side of it. Yeah.
So just really quickly, I just want to talk about you, Bob, like what's going on with the podcast for the rest of the year. What do you got going for both True Crime Binge and Truth and Justice?
True Crime Binge is Binge as usual. We just have we've got a lot of great guests. I think we have Sruti and Hannah from Red Handed are coming up. I think we just dropped Jordan Bonaparte was on the podcast. But on Truth and Justice, we're still working on a case out of Pinyon Pines, California, which is near Palm Springs, Coachella Valley area. Pretty horrific triple homicide and arson. We've been working on the case actually since February, and we're still a long ways from finishing it. Truth and Justice is very long form, deep dive into potential wrongful conviction cases. So we are about 35 weeks into that season, and don't even see the finish line yet. Pretty complicated case.
Yeah, so it's very different. If you guys don't know, I'm sure a lot of my listeners do know Truth and Justice, but if you don't, it's very different from what I do, which is like one case a week. I mean, he goes really deep, whole seasons, one case, wrongful convictions, and really doing some really detailed research. So, yeah, that's definitely something. It's funny because your other one's called True Crime Binge, but I tend to binge Truth and Justice when I listen to Truth and Justice, because you have
right.
You want to kind of know what's going on and you don't want to wait. So usually I'll binge those, and that way I can keep track of what's happening, because it's a lot of times it changes from week to week when you guys get new things that come up or interviews or more information, and then you kind of go back into the story and maybe look at it from a different angle. That's the way I kind of see it.
Yeah. Well, it's complicated. We are truly doing a real-time crowdsourced investigation. So yeah, opinions change, new information comes to light every single week. It's an actual investigation. And yeah, it's always funny when people will tell me like, well, now you say that you don't think this person was a suspect when before you said they were. Like, right. We got new information that has now led us down the path. But yeah, it's definitely one you're not going to just pop in and listen to an episode of Truth and Justice. It's a ride. You got to be in for the whole season.
It's called an investigation. That's what you do.
Right.
You have theories, and then sometimes they fit, and sometimes you throw them out because it doesn't fit the evidence. That's kind of the way it goes. Mm-hmm. If you're doing it right, I would assume.
That's the idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Bob, for clarifying that you did not go to school there and that you live there, and giving the insight of the culture just surrounding the university and everything. And yeah, we'll have to next time. I'm sure we'll have several more drinks when we get to the next meetup.
For sure. But thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
Have a great day. Thank you so much. Thanks once again to my special guest, Bob Ruff. Check out both of his podcasts, Truth and Justice and True Crime Binge. Links to both are in the show notes. There are also links for the documentary Untold, The Girlfriend Who Didn't Exist, which you can stream on Netflix, as well as an article detailing the Manti Te'o catfishing case. Finally, I was recently a guest on Bob's podcast, True Crime Binge. That link is also in the show notes. I'll be back next week with the last episode of 2021. Can you believe it? I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah, or whatever holidays you celebrate with family and friends. Stay safe out there, and until next time, be good to one another.